Jamaica, or Jamaica as it was known to the Arawak Indians. They were the first aboriginal inhabitants on their Isle of Springs, and by all accounts lived at peace among themselves until the arrival of the Spanish fleet in 1494. The Spanish came in search of gold. They found no treasures, but instead a cheap source of labor, and the Arawaks were quickly driven into submission to work the fields and mines. The Indians fell to forced labor and were virtually exterminated. If Spain wished to hold Jamaica, she needed new slaves. Her eyes turned across the Atlantic Ocean and settled on West Africa. The first slave ships, packed with their black cargo, anchored in Jamaica in 1517, and in the following years, hundreds more sailed off from the Gold Coast, with Africans bound together in darkness and disease. Those who survived their voyage held up to their new captivity and quickly supplanted the few remaining Arawaks. However, not every ship returned to Jamaica, nor could every plantation control its enslaved. Some Africans chose open rebellion. Organized insurrections increased with time, only to be crushed again and again by the Europeans. In 1655, Jamaica was invaded by the British fleet. In the midst of the confusion, large numbers of Spanish slaves took their chances and fled into the dense interior, where they banded together for protection. Within a few years, Spain formally relinquished control of the island, and Jamaica began a new and dark chapter under English rule. Lost to the isolation of the thick and hilly Midlands, the fugitive slaves cared little. They were free men, and now concentrated on building their numbers. While below, the British colonists streamlined the patterns of slave trade already firmly entrenched. Towards the early 18th century, Jamaica began to prosper as a major sugar colony. The English king was delighted, and to encourage an even healthier plantation economy, thousands of new slaves were acquired, and new settlements flourished. The island now supported a large black population, bound under a determined white minority. Through ignorance and greed, Jamaica and slavery became one, with the slave trade ruling the fates of all parties involved. Word spread of those slaves who had escaped during the British invasion and who now roamed the interior. They became known as Maroons, from the Spanish cimarron, or unruly ones, and their bold organized raids on white settlements shocked the English and inspired other slaves to escape and join those already free in the mountains. Many early Maroons were born in Africa. They represented many differing tribes with their own cultural backgrounds and languages. There were the Ashantis and Fantis, the Aways and Gos, the Igbos and Yorubas, and countless others between. From these individuals, a common society took root and arose in the forests to become the Maroons. The British colonial government, recognizing its growing vulnerability, organized a series of military campaigns against the Maroons, yet these almost always met with defeat. Even though the English forces greatly outnumbered the Maroons and were far better equipped, it seemed these Maroon soldiers, led by their disciplined officers, were all but invincible. The Maroons fought a guerrilla war, camouflaged in leaves and lying in ambush, and they used the abang, a horn, whose sound carried over long distances to forewarn others of the approach of enemy forces. The fighting grew, often desperate for both sides, but the Maroons simply could not be defeated, and so in 1739 the English sued for peace. The two major groups of Maroons, one to the west in the Cockpit country, and one in the eastern Blue Mountains, signed formal treaties, entitling the Maroons to full freedom and self-rule, large land grants, exemption from taxation, and peace. Today, the descendants of these people live a peaceful life in the hills of Jamaica. The Maroons haven't forgotten their heroic past. They recite tales of Grandee Nanny. Grandee Nanny, the ancient freedom fighter, the great Maroon heroine who used her awesome supernatural powers to keep the English at bay. They recall the glories of past battles, but above all, they cling to the freedom for which their ancestors fought so bitterly. Today, Jamaica is an independent nation, a dynamic, changing third world country. The Maroons are full Jamaican citizens, but still they remain a people apart, islands within an island. They understand the Jamaican wilderness as no one else can. The mountains, the woodlands, the caves, and the rains, always the rains. Moortown. This is the largest of 4 Maroon towns in Jamaica, and its population is thought to number well above 1,000 residents. It was here that a large number of the eastern Maroons settled shortly before their historic treaty with the British in 1740. The impression of isolation is deceptive. For generations, the Maroons of Moortown have been in close contact with people from the outside. Today, Moortown is physically indistinguishable from most other rural Jamaican villages. Its neat little zinc-roofed houses, its churches, shops, and rum bars tell little of the ancient Maroon legacy. At first glimpse, there is nothing in Moortown to summon up images of a turbulent past. But beneath the surface, the past lives on.
Moortown, man. It's the capital.
Yeah, man. Moortown is the capital of Earth, you know.
There's no place on earth like the capital. What you say?
It's the Maroon roots.
No truth. Moortown, Earth capital. Strictly.
In Moortown, there is a strong sense of continuity with the Maroon past. For all the changes that have come to Moortown in the last century, there remain many elements connecting today's lifestyle to that of earlier years. Although they are Jamaican citizens, the Moortown Maroons are still governed in the tradition of the treaty by an elected council and chief officer called the Colonel, Colonel C.L.G. Harris.
My duty as Colonel, simply stated, is to work for the betterment, the all-round betterment of our community. But as you may well surmise, there are several facets of this rather large sphere of responsibility. Some of these, a few of them are, I must preside at all meetings, committee meetings and township meetings. I must make representations to the government on behalf of my people. I must settle disputes, particularly those involving more than one claimant to any special parcel of land. And I'm expected to see about all cases of non-Maroons who come to Moortown, searching for knowledge as far as our history is concerned.
As in the past, land in and around Moortown is communally held by the Maroons as a group, although it is divided up into small farms cultivated and maintained by individuals. The Maroons are still not required to pay taxes on these lands. The farmers of Moortown continue to follow the time-tested traditions of their ancestors. Using the clearing technique known as slash and burn, they grow a few basic subsistence crops, mostly tubers such as yams, dasheen, and cocoa. Farming along the steep slopes is formidable. With cutlass, hoe, and fork, the soil must be worked and the seed sown. So the grandparents planted, and so their grandparents before them. The Maroons have succeeded well as woodsmen. After their treaty, it was only natural that they sell their skills to those outside. For years, Maroons have supplied hand-sawed lumber to other Jamaicans, as they still do today. The forests abound in hard lumber, but the work is demanding and slow, and the pay is low. The Maroons have learned from their ancestors how to use the forest to their advantage. Wild plants such as thatchhead provide a steady source of food in the farthest reaches of the forests. Some of these edible plants are known only to Maroons today. It was such knowledge that saved the early Maroons in times of emergency when crops could not be relied on. Even the Maroon children have learned to gather from the wilds. The Maroon country also abounds in rivers and streams. Today, as in the past, these provide people with a supplementary source of food which can be depended on when times are hard. One of the few remaining Maroon hunters, Leonard White, explains how the Maroons today use the traditional lance, called junga, or a sunodaja, to bring down their prey, the wild hog. The early Maroons were famous for their skill in hunting the boars which ranged the deeper mountains of Jamaica.
Now we have to spin fast and come round all different kind of way and come back to the same movement where we is. And we have to attempt this way. Dog, plenty, and hold them this way.
To help preserve the meat of the wild hog, the Maroons created a special method of preparation called jerking. The meat is seasoned with a mixture of salt and hot pepper and then put aside to cure for several hours. It is later roasted over an open fire. The jerking method has been adopted by other Jamaicans, and today jerk pork has become a favorite delicacy on the island.
Wild hog is a very dangerous thing.
The wild hog is a very dangerous thing.
So we have to have this.
So we need this as our defense.
Defense. Old time.
The old-time Maroons used to use it this way, like a gun, to defend themselves. During the days of Grandy Nanny, we had to use it in this way, and also to kill the wild hog. We used it all different kinds of ways during the old-time days. We call it the Asunu Daja. Raja, the official abang blower for Moortown, prepares his abang for signaling. This instrument, which originated in West Africa, was used as a strategic device to keep the Maroons forewarned of the approach of enemies. Even today, the tonal language of the abang can be used to signal emergency, but more often it is used to call the Maroons to assembly. The language of the abang is a Maroon's secret. The signals for war, carried down from previous generations, have not been forgotten. Ambush. This is what the Maroons call the ancient art of camouflage. Such ingenuity that contributed to the military successes of the early Maroons. They were, after all, the first black guerrilla fighters in the New World. Today, their memory lives on in this practice, reenacted during special ceremonies, such as this one, presided over by the Colonel and Assistant Secretary of Moortown. Besides gaining a reputation as fierce fighters, the Maroons also became well known throughout the country as healers, owing to their exceptional knowledge of the bush. Uncle George, a Maroon herbal healer, displays one of his remedies.
And this medicine now.
This medicine is Grandy Nanny's medicine, the medicine of our tribe.
That
from Grandi Nani to Grandi Sekesu.
Grandi Nani and Grandi Sekesu and all of our ancestors, we form a tribe. And that is why we have learned how to fix up this
This
medicine.
medicine, you take it and shake it up. And do it so. And throw it in your glass. And drink 1 wine glass 3 times a day. Going to bed at night, you drink 1 wine glass. That's this one. This medicine go to lots of people.
This medicine has gone out to lots of people, more than 1,000. It is good for the stomach.
This is our weed.
This now is one of our weeds. We take this and juice it and use it to bathe people.
Pain and all sickness.
We use it to treat pain and various kinds of sickness and complaints. This is our weed. It is called Grandi Nani weed. In some cases, sickness may require more than herbal treatment. This young man is complaining of stomach pains. When it is divined that a sickness such as this has been caused by the influence of supernatural powers, then the spirits of ancestors must be invoked to fight against the evil afflicting the victim. The ritual specialist, known as the dancer man, must undergo years of training to acquire the knowledge necessary to effect a cure. Sacrifice may be offered. As in many African societies, this is a sign of reverence for the ancestors. The close tie between Maroon healers and the spirits of their ancestors is an important part of traditional Maroon culture. It creates a bridge between the present and the past and lends a sense of continuity to Maroon society over the generations. Hopwood, the assistant secretary of the Moortown Maroons, is an accomplished chromanti drummer. In times of crisis, the chromanti drum may be used to invoke Maroon spirits to come and possess the living. In this form, the spirits offer their aid.
This is a Maroon drum. It's made by me. It's called the chromanti drum. It is handed down from our ancestors. It was used during the days when Nani was fighting against the English. They are very sacred to the Maroons. Use them to send messages. They are used to send messages to the spirit world. In other words, when we are playing for sick, nobody, no strangers, nobody except Maroons can attend that ceremony. It's very sacred. I started to play this drum from I was about 4 or 5 years of age. I learned to play it by just watching the players when they are playing at nights or during the days. I mean, I feel pleasure all the while in playing it, because it is of great importance to me.
During an annual celebration in October, the Maroons combine drumming and singing with dance. A woman falls to the first stages of spirit possession, but is quickly cleared of the spirit. Auntie Liz has been the midwife of Moortown for years. She has delivered the majority of the people living in Moortown today.
96. My age is 96.
My age is 96.
And I had most people in Moortown.
I have looked after the babies of almost all the people of Moortown.
And I could have danced.
I used to dance the Maroon dance very well.
Very much. And when I look after the baby then...
And when I have looked after the babies, the government has not looked after me properly.
I think over that very
I think
much.
about this very much.
God help me to get through. I fight the good fight with all I might.
The younger Maroons are still surrounded by tradition. Some Maroon traditions are being passed down to them, such as the gaita, a type of bamboo stilt used for sport during Easter. But change is in the air.
Today,
George Sterling
I
is
am
the secretary
very
of the
happy
Moortown Maroons, and for many years has been an influential member of the Maroon Council.
some people really believe that Maroons are things of the past. But today, I can assure that I am a true born Maroon, and I am alive. It was miraculous to know how it happens, but it did happen in truth. Nanny scientifically works our way out, and the British has got to subdue by asking for a peace treaty to be signed betwixt the Maroons and the British government. And it was so done with the signing of both British blood and Maroon blood. It was also mixed with rum and was drunk by each party as a oath that there should be no war again with the Maroons and the British government. And because of that, I am happy to be a Maroon today as a freedom fighter. And it was so happy that a few years after Maroon got their freedom, then the government find it possible to give freedom to the rest of slaves the first day of August in that year. So today we are happy that Jamaica is a free country, beginning from the Maroons who fought strenuously for freedom for their race.